bothered by any of our resident seagulls. Part of their diet out in the wild would include seabirds, and these boys have had to help themselves to a snack or two in the past. The resident seagulls have learned their lesson and they steer well clear. However, when we do go to the convalescent pool and feed a little bit later on, do keep an eye out for some of our one-legged resident seagulls on site. They've got a bit too close to these boys in the past, they've suffered the consequences, and they now have the scars to prove it. So you will see them flying around here at the sanctuary. But as I say, it should be nice and quiet for us to be able to feed here this afternoon. So that brings us to the end of our talk, and we are going to move on to feed these guys. If we do have any children that would like an opportunity to help to feed, by all means please do join us up here on the bridge. Now I would like to take this opportunity just to thank all of you for coming along and supporting us here today. It's down to you guys, our visitors, that enable us to continue the work that we do here. It costs us about £1,000 per pup to rescue, rehabilitate and release. Last winter we rescued and released 48 stray seal pups, and this year we already have our first 6 pups up in the hospital, 4 of which are on due, and if you would like to go up and see them, by all means please do. They're absolutely adorable. But that funding that we require, that comes from you guys, so a great big thank you to you all, and it costs us about £10,000 a month to feed all of our permanent residents all the way through the year. So again, that comes from you, so a great big thank you. Thank you ever so much for listening. I do hope you found it informative. If you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm going to sign off for a minute. I'm going to hand out some gloves. We're going to come back. We're going to tease these boys. So if you would like to stay and watch some feeding, by all means, please do.
Yeah, we're the big office. Take the office there, it's really loud. I bet they were kids don't play. Oh, the seagulls fly past a little bit.
See, he doesn't even want to do it. It's Dad's doing it. I want to do it.
Where am I?
That seagull's really thick. Yeah.
Oh gosh, the seagulls are really. Oh, look.
Oh gosh, yeah, get it.
That's a mean can't go much.
I know that.
Did the seagull nip the fish?
Yeah, and now they're all attacking each other.
That's good. I thought every seagull from everywhere.
I wish that sea, but the sea.
Yeah, same, but it's not a good hotel.
Should I go up there so she'll let me do it?
Can do.
She'll say no.
Should we let the parents?
Yeah, see him go.
Pretty fast for an old guy.
One, two, why these guys are separate from the greys that you've just seen in our convalescent pool, and that's because the two larger boys in this pool here are non-castrated males. They haven't been castrated, they're still fully intact. So instead of putting them in with our females in the convalescent pool, they had their own bachelor pad up this end of the pool complex. Now, we originally just had the two larger boys in here, but they've recently been joined by a third seal. His name is Marlin, and he's just with Claire over on the far side, nearest to the waterfall, and the pallet over in the corner. Now, Marlin is much smaller than the other two boys. He has been castrated, and he's only 9 years old. But he hasn't been in here very long, so we haven't done as much training with him as we have with the two larger boys. So Claire's currently just working with him. We're trying to get Marlin to learn to come up and out of the pool, onto the haul-out area, so that we can do training with him. But with the two larger boys over on the haul-out area, Flipper closest to the entrance gate and your logs nearest to the green bridge, you'll see the animal care team doing some hands-on target training with them. Using the target sticks, we'll ask them to lift their nose up to touch the target stick so we can check their neck and throat. Then we'll ask them to maintain a hold position with their nose on the target stick, while Amy then works her way right down the full length of their bodies, checking their side and rear flippers and feeling right along their spinal column where blood samples will be taken from. Now, not only does this enable us to give them a regular health check, but it also means that if the vets ever need to come and do any work with these boys, it's not something they'll find stressful, because it's part and parcel of their daily work here at the sanctuary. So to tell you a little bit about the boys individually, as I say, with Claire we have Marlin. He's just 9 years of age. He was rescued in our 2001 pup season from Sennen Cove. We brought him in because he was entangled in a fishing net. We took him into the hospital and treated him for his injury. When we got him down to the pools and he started swimming around for his rehabilitation, we noticed he was bumping into all the sides. It was then that we realised Marlin is unfortunately completely blind, and that's why he's here with us at the sanctuary. But you will notice that he does follow the target stick, and we use the vibration and the knocking noise for him to be able to work out what we're asking him to do. And then we use the whistles when we're training as well, so they do get a vocal command as well as their visual instruction. So they do really well even when they are blind. But that's why Marlin's here with us. Then we have Flipper, who's closest to the entrance gate. He was rescued nearly 30 years ago by our founder, Ken Jones. Now, Flipper was rescued as a young pup because unfortunately, when he was just a baby, he came into contact with a chemical pollutant in the water. He's just lifting his nose up there in the air, and you may well be able to see some pinky white scarring on the end of his nose. Unfortunately, this was the external damage that was done by the chemical pollutant. But unfortunately for Flipper, not only was it external damage, but he inhaled some of the chemical as well. The result is that he's damaged his lungs, and he's unable to hold his breath for long enough to be able to dive for his fish in the wild. Would anyone like to take a guess as to how long they think a grey seal should be able to hold their breath for? 35 minutes? Little bit more than 35 minutes. You're ever so close. It's actually 45 minutes that they can hold their breath for. A normal dive will be 20 to 30 minutes, but they can hold their breath for up to 45. But for Flipper, because of the damage he incurred as a pup, he can only hold his breath for about 2 or 3 minutes. So you can understand why he couldn't be released, because he just wouldn't be able to catch fish for himself out in the wild. So that just leaves your Logs, and Logs' story is a little bit different. Logs was originally rescued by a sanctuary in the north of England. They rescued him as a young pup, they rehabilitated him, but at the last minute, instead of releasing him, they decided to keep him as a permanent resident. Now, when Logs got to about 4.5, 5 years of age, he started showing some very aggressive, dominant behaviour. This isn't unusual, that's the sort of age they reach maturity, and especially for a non-castrated male, they will become that much more aggressive and dominant. The team looking after him at the time felt that this behaviour would enable him to compete with other seals out in the wild, so they made the decision to release Logs. Unfortunately, after nearly 5 years in captivity and no rehabilitation, when Logs was released, he had no idea how to fend for himself. So it wasn't long after he was released that a member of the general public phoned the RSPCA, and they made the call to say that there was a rather large adult male grey seal chasing some young children up and down a local beach. He couldn't understand why there were all these kids with buckets and spades and no one was giving him any fish. All Logs knew was that fish came from a bucket and he was fed by human hand. Unfortunately, by this time he had lost nearly 2/3 of his body weight because he'd been unable to feed himself. So So we agreed with the RSPCA the best thing to do would be for us to have logs. So we went out and we re-rescued him and we brought him back to the sanctuary, we fattened him up, and he now lives quite happy in the knowledge that his fish does come from a bucket and he will be fed on a regular basis. So when the animal care team come to the end of the feeding, they'll tell the boys when it's their last fish, and then they'll give them a tap of the bucket just to let them know that all of their fish have gone, and that will bring us to the end of our talk and our feed here in this enclosure. Which is a final signal to let the boys know all their fish has gone. We're now going to be moving one more pool across to feed with our